Good evening. This is week 3 out of 5. One announcement is that the last day of class will be normal time. So sometimes we extend that last day, just the normal time, 7 to 8:30. I think your handout says it might be extended. It's not. Normal time. Easy to remember. We will do another discussion group after this class. So from 8:30 to 9:15, if you want to hang out, just kind of pretty informal, get to know each other more, talk about what we talked about in class more. This time I brought cookies, so ramping it up. I had planned to make a quick mention of like different Kadampa etiquette, but I didn't really get through my whole list. One thing is if you tend to wear perfume, you want to avoid strong scents when you're in the Kadampa, so no need to reapply before you come in. It just helps people, especially when we're doing longer meditations, and I think our last day is a lot of meditation, so that's helpful to other people who are sensitive to that. And I think that's it. I got through like a good amount of like paperwork for me in terms of all the completion cards and things like that. So if you have completion cards from the past or you're trying to fill one out, I have everything updated all in my notebook, and I can help you with that. But if you're just here to learn, no need to worry about it, but here to help you with that. Okay, thanks.
No, I can do this myself. It shouldn't be that hard. I can visualize what I'm trying to do. I'm concentrating. Okay. So I assume I'm working here, all wired? Okay, great. Let's begin by doing 3 prostrations. No requirement to do those, but if you'd like to join me, please do. So we'll just do 3 prostrations to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Okay, good evening, everyone. As Aaron said, this is the 3rd of 5 classes in the Discovering Buddhism module on death and rebirth. Let's see, do we have anybody here for the first time tonight? Okay, a couple people, great. Glad to have you here. I think you'll be able to jump in. We'll do a little bit of review and then start on the 9-point death meditation tonight. We had a great discussion last week. Thank you, everyone, for your participation, and I encourage you to be equally participatory tonight when I give you the opportunity to do so. And remember to wait for the mic before you make any comments. So let's begin with some prayers. In the Gold Prayer Book, everybody should have a copy of that in front of them. Page 34. We'll do Taking Refuge in Bodhicitta 3 times. We'll do the 4 immeasurables, and then we'll do the 7-limb prayer, and we'll do these all in English. And again, there's no requirement to join in on these, but it said this is like preparing the soil before we plant the seeds. So before we get into our discussion this evening, some prayers to help set our motivation, become a little bit more focused, are very helpful. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness, the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the merit. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence, and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. Need a clock so we don't stay here till 10 o'clock or so meditating. Okay. Let's begin with some meditation. If you're joining us for the first time, we begin by checking our posture, whether we're seated on a cushion or in a chair. We have our back a little bit straighter than we normally sit. Our head is not tilted to one side or the other, maybe a couple degrees in front of the vertical. Our eyes either slightly open or lightly closed. Our lips lightly closed, our jaws not clenched. Our shoulders are down, not up around our ears and back. Our upper arms are away from our torso, and we can either sit with our right hand with our hands on our knees, or more traditionally, right hand on left, symbolizing the two wings of enlightenment, compassion and wisdom, with our thumbs touching just below our navel. If we're sitting in a chair, our feet are flat. It's fine to put a cushion underneath our feet if we need it, but our feet aren't dangling. And we're not leaning back in the chair, but we're a little bit forward. And if we're sitting on a cushion, we're towards the front third of the cushion, and our legs are in a posture that we find comfortable and non-distracting. So check your posture. If there are any sources of tension or discomfort, address them now so there'll not be a constant irritation during the actual meditation. And to help calm our mind, we'll begin by taking 3 deep breaths from the abdomen so that our stomach expands on the in-breath and contracts towards our spine on the out-breath. So the diaphragm is pulled down and our lungs are completely filled. And now we allow our breath to return to its normal pattern. And as always, we begin the meditation by setting our motivation. And whatever our motivation is, it's a fine one. If we're just here out of curiosity and want to give meditation a try, that's great. If we want to do the meditation because it relaxes our mind, it makes us feel a little bit calmer, great. But it's said that the most powerful motivation, the motivation that gives the most meaning and energy to our meditation, is what's referred to as the bodhicitta motivation. The thought that everything I do, even something as simple as sitting in meditation for 10 minutes, is done so that I may be of greater benefit to all living beings, to my family, my friends, my co-workers, the people I don't like, all the strangers, all the animals, all the beings throughout all the realms, so that I can be of benefit to them. And that may seem a little bit unnatural or strange, not the way we normally think. So we have to kind of generate it effortfully. It doesn't come naturally. But even forcing it out is said to be very beneficial. So let's just take a moment and establish the motivation. Okay, just stay lying down. Don't get up. Go ahead and lie down. And raise your feet up. Yeah, wiggle your toes. Yeah, get some blood circulating. Yeah, just, yeah.
All of a sudden I just got hot and dizzy.
Yeah, I think you were going to faint, yeah.
That's usually what I do.
That's when you get a taste of the subtle mind, when you're getting ready to faint. Don't worry, no problem. Of course, yeah. Just stay down, don't get up yet, yeah. Okay, just stay down a little bit. Stretch your legs out and wiggle around, get your blood circulating.
I just broke out in a hot sweat and I felt like I needed to. Did you eat dinner?
Yeah. Yeah, that's good, yeah. Yeah. Why don't you help her out there and see if there's somewhere she can lie down and just wiggle. It's a little warm in here. Yeah, get out there where it's cooler. She'll feel better. Wiggle your toes, get your blood moving, yeah. Oh, don't worry about that. That's no problem. Yeah, you interrupted our bodhicitta motivation. How dare you? Golly, other people. Yeah, that's good. Why don't you let her lie down there?
Is that good?
Yeah, yeah, okay. Yeah, you can lie down over there, okay? Oh, okay.
This is just throw it out.
Yeah, they cost about $1.50 each. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it can be repaired. That's okay. They're ancient. Okay, where were we? Okay, again, let's just take a moment. Check our posture again. And again, we'll go back to setting our motivation. We were just about finished with that. So we're not supposed to be doing this meditation. It's up here. It's Miranda's, I think. We're creating more merit, yeah, by doing it with all these obstacles. So. Okay. As we, once again, the third time makes magic. Yeah, okay. Okay, we've set our motivation. And we're just going to place our awareness on the breath. The physical sensation of the breath moving in and out through our nostrils. Nothing more, nothing less than that. Just air moving in and out through the opening of the nostrils on each side. We're not thinking about it. We're not describing it to ourselves. We're not even counting. We're just direct awareness, consciousness on the breath. And every time the consciousness moves away, we drop the distracting object and come back to the breath. Over and over and over again. And that's the meditation. A simple concentration meditation, training the mind to stay on the chosen object. whenever the concentration wanders off, we bring it back again and again and again. And as always, we end our meditation with a dedication. We think by sitting and working with my mind for a few minutes, I've done something positive. I've created a virtuous imprint on my mind stream, and may that imprint not be lost, but in the future, may it ripen in a way that benefits all living beings. See, Aaron, I'm going to need some sort of whiteboard to write on tonight. Okay. Jill hasn't found the small one? Oh, good. How kind of us to leave it there. Okay. So last week we talked a little bit about the nature of the mind and entertained the possibility of rebirth. There's certainly no requirement that we accept the idea of rebirth, but all the Buddhist teachings are based on a kind of acceptance of rebirth. That's not really something he taught specifically. It was much more a commonly accepted belief in the environment in which he was teaching 2,500 years ago. For us, it's generally not commonly believed, and it's something each of us has to grapple with and come to terms with eventually. Tonight we're going to do what's called the 9-point death meditation. I'll introduce that, and if time allows, we'll actually do the meditation. If not, you can do that during the week at home. And then next week we'll do what's referred to as the death dissolution meditation, which is actually practicing going through the stages of dying as the great meditators have described them to us. Just to review a little bit for those of us who were and those of us who weren't here last week, what's the Buddhist definition of death? Miranda? Microphone? Let's see, do we have a microphone? Yeah. Thank you.
The Buddha defines dying as the body and mind separating? Yeah,
the separation of the body and mind, which is very different from the Western medical definition of death. As we discussed last week, frequently great meditators, the mind will still be in the body or still be united with the body long after what would have been termed the moment of death by Western standards. So the body is very easy to identify. That's the physical aspect of our being. The bones, the flesh, the heart, the organs, and the brain. The brain is not the consciousness or the mind, two terms I'll use interchangeably. So that's the body, the physical aspect of our being. What is the mind or the consciousness? How did we describe that? There are certain characteristics of it. Can anybody remember any of those? And you don't have to wait for the mic on these. It's in the nature of clear light. What else? Non-local in term, what do you mean? It's non-physical, yeah, okay. By non-local, you mean non-physical. It's completely non-physical. Somebody was talking about this on, I leave the radio on at night. Somebody was on the BBC News, like at 4 in the morning the other night, was talking about how science is trying to come to terms with what consciousness, pure consciousness is. And did anybody else hear this? Someone was talking about robots and computers, and The question is, will they have a consciousness? And the guy's answer, this is on Krista Tippett, Sunday morning, actually. And the guy said, if they do, how will we know it? I mean, we can't see consciousness, so it's non-physical. We can't so far measure it. So if computers develop consciousness, this guy's response was, well, how will we know it? Anyway, it's completely non-physical. Okay, we've got one other character. What's the second characteristic we talked about? Correct. It has no beginning and no end. For every moment of consciousness, we can find a previous moment of consciousness, tracing back through countless rebirths, according to the Buddha, ATB. And in the future, it continues in the future, again, without end. There will always be a future moment of consciousness. It's like a river without a source and without an end, continually flowing throughout time. The third characteristic is that its nature is that of clear light, or it's said to be empty, in that it's like vast empty space. All the thoughts and emotions and likes and dislikes and personality are temporary events occurring in the consciousness, but they are not the ultimate nature of the consciousness. It certainly seems to ourselves that we have a fixed way of being, angry, impatient, kind. Again, those are just mental phenomena occurring within the space of the consciousness. And the Buddha is someone who's filled his consciousness with nothing but wise and compassionate thoughts. That's all he is. He just thinks different thoughts than we are. That's the only difference between us in our present state of confusion and a Buddha, the content of his thoughts. Our consciousness and the consciousness of a Buddha are similar. They're of the same nature. They're not the same consciousness, but there's no actual difference. It's just the content of the thoughts of the mental phenomena that distinguishes a Buddha from one of us. Okay, so it's clear light. And then the fourth one is the function of the mind or the consciousness to perceive, to be aware, to know. Okay, in the sense that I perceive this clock. Okay, my perception is a phenomena occurring in my consciousness. And then that gets into a whole nother class on how does the clock really exist? Does it exist only in my perception of it, or is there something exterior to my consciousness? And that's not the subject of this class, okay? But so it's very important that we get a sense of what we're talking about when we're talking about the consciousness and what we're talking about death. Death is when the physical and non-physical aspects of our being that have come together temporarily, and, very just held together with a little bit of karmic glue. That glue wears out and they separate. The body decays, dissolves, the consciousness continues onto the next rebirth. So that's what we talked about last week. Any questions, comments, concerns about that? Yeah, over here. Microphone, please.
Okay, so when the mind has separated from the body, is it still able to perceive?
Yeah, yeah, the mind still perceives because it goes into the bardo state, as we talked about last week, and their perceptions are quite vivid and frequently quite frightening. So the mind is still functioning to perceive, okay? It's not attached to a body, to a physical body at that point, but it is still perceiving. Okay. Guillermo.
Thank you. Yeah, just thinking in the so-called perception, external perception. Right now, for example, we are seeing persons, furniture, but I think everything is happening inside of our mind. Kind of electrical transmission like a TV inside. Perhaps we are thinking that it's outside, but it seems that everything is inside. No?
That's a good point. Emotion, when I talk about perceive, I'm also talking about emotions, memories, analytical thoughts, everything. And according to the Buddha, this clock and when I go home tonight, my memory of this clock are really no different. They're in the same nature. They're both just perceptions or knowings of the mind, and their ultimate nature is no different. One is not more real than the other. They're all mental phenomena. Yeah, okay? Okay, so we're going to move on to the 9-point death meditation. And if you're not aware of it yet, this will point it out that Tibetan Buddhism loves lists and loves to enumerate things. 3 of this, 4 of that, 51 of those. So this is only 9, so this is pretty easy. And you can memorize this over the course of the next week. This is the 9-point death meditation. You actually could call it the 12 points, but I'll explain that in a minute. There are 3 main points. 1, 2, and 3. And then under each other one, there are 3. Under each of these, there are 3 points. So we could actually say there are 12, but they counted up as 9. And then there actually is a conclusion to each one you come to. So you could say it was 15, but they called it 9. So it's the 9-point death meditation. If you start talking about the 15-point death meditation, nobody's going to know what you're talking about. The first major point is that death is definite. Anybody not know that? Anybody live their life like this is a truth on a daily basis? That death is definitely going to happen to you, to me, to I. Okay. First point is death is definite. Second major point is the time of death is unknown. Nobody knows when they're going to die. And the third point, the only thing that benefits us, let's see, the only, our spiritual practice is useful at the time of death. Okay, the first 2 are obvious. Okay, this one is not quite as obvious for most of us. Death is definite, time of death is unknown, and only our spiritual, practice is useful at the time of death. So this is what we call an analytic meditation, as opposed to watching the breath, which is a simple concentration meditation. But again, it's similar in that we are working with a chosen object and we're keeping our mind on it. And so for when we're doing the first point, death is definite, that is what we keep our mind concentrated on, that concept, as opposed to just paying attention to our breath. We pay attention to the idea that death is definite, and we use our mind's ability to remember, to reason, to analyze, to make this point hit home in our mind. Okay? And for a lot of people, when they start doing this type of meditation, it seems just like thinking. and it may be very difficult, and that's okay. But it's more concentrated and more focused than just thinking, in that we keep our mind, it's set on this, like just glued to that point. Okay, death is definite. And certainly we all have, we all can, give intellectual acknowledgement to that. Nobody's going to disagree with that, but it's not something that's in our mind stream constantly. And it's said that when we meditate on this, eventually we come to what's called a realization, which means the reality of the definiteness of death is always with us. Okay? In the same way, the reality, the time of death is unknown. Nobody knows when they're going to die, is with us always when we realize it. Now, most of us aren't going to get to that point. We're still dealing with this intellectually. But the point is to incorporate this in our mind stream so that it actually changes our behavior. When? In future lives? No, in this very lifetime. And that's the reason that we meditate on death so much in Tibetan Buddhism. Not because we're gloomy or we're looking forward to the moment of death or we're suicidal, but because ATB, according to the Buddha, if we meditate on these points, our life, this life, becomes more meaningful. Whether we have any belief in rebirth or not, meditating on death will make this life more valuable. Okay, let's see, we had a question here. If you can give her a mic.
The question that I have is, when I'm meditating on something like this, is it typically like in the subtle mind or the coarse mind?
Right now we're working with our coarse mind.
Okay.
The gross mind, yeah.
Okay.
The
That
mind
makes
that's, drove here and got stuck in the traffic and all of that, yeah.
Okay.
We're not accessing our subtle mind for most of us aren't when we meditate.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay. Okay, so to help us with this, to get some sense of this, the Buddha gave us a couple pointers or three three things to help us think about this. The first one, let's see, I'll label these A, B, and C. Everyone, death is definite, everyone dies. No exception. There's been nobody in history, except for the people who are currently living, who has not died. No matter how famous they were, how wealthy, how powerful, no one escaped death. Every single person who was alive 150 years ago is dead. Not one of them did not die. Okay? Think of all the people that we've known personally who have died. Okay, this is, again, not to get depressed, but to really come to grips with the reality that everyone dies. And I am included in everyone. I don't get an exception. I may live my life and think, oh, that doesn't apply to me at some level. Everyone dies, okay? This one I really like. Your lifespan is constantly growing shorter. Everyone in this room is closer to the moment of their death than when they got here this evening. Everyone. Nobody is moving away from their death. We are all inevitably, constantly moving closer to the moment of our death. No exceptions. Okay? And the third point is, we have little time for spiritual practice. I'll just abbreviate that SP. A lot of us think, okay, I'm going to live to be 63, then I'll retire, I'll get my mortgage paid off, then I'll go do a retreat, okay? But first I have to catch up on my sleep, and I have to take that great European vacation, and I have to see my kids through college. We're always putting it off, okay? We may not have time to put it off, okay? The time we have for spiritual practice is constantly decreasing. And of that time that's left to us, how much do we spend in sleeping? At least a third, or close to a third. How much time do we spend in feeding, sitting on the toilet, doing all these other things? So how much time do we have left for spiritual practice, particularly if we put it off? You know, because I'm going to live to be the actuarial 77.6 years. We have very little time for spiritual practice. Okay? So the conclusion we come to is what? Oh God, it's hopeless. I should just go and kill myself now. I should jump off a cliff. What kind of conclusion do we come to if we think about this ATB? What did the Buddha said? Yeah, we must, therefore, we must use our life meaningfully. This gives a sense of urgency to what we do with the time that is available to us, okay? Okay, death is definite. We meditate on this, and you can bring in any other arguments or logics or memories into giving yourself a sense that death is definite. So I have to do something meaningful with this life, okay? I don't, you know, it's going to end, so let's do something, okay? So you can bring in lots of other points, but the Buddha said these three he found particularly helpful. Okay, the time of death is unknown. Anybody know when they're going to die? Anybody been told by a fortune teller when they were going to die? I've met people like that, yeah. And I've never known anyone where it worked out, yeah. Okay, so nobody knows when they're going to die, okay. Human lifespan, uncertain. Okay, is uncertain. Like I say, the average is in the upper 70s now, I think even longer. And they say if you get to 75, there's a good chance you'll get to 90. But we all know people who died when they were younger, children who died before their parents, okay? People who had great plans, great retirement accounts set up, and their mortgage paid off, and kaput, it's gone. The lifespan of any individual is completely uncertain. None of us necessarily are guaranteed that we'll get the average span, or we think by eating healthy and thinking good thoughts that we're going to pass that. We're going to be here till our 80s. Who thinks they're going to live until their 80s? Probably the majority, okay? Who knows they're going to live until their 80s? Okay, not as many, yeah. So it's uncertain, okay? And this is another goodie here. The causes of death are many, multiple, everywhere. I mean, just driving to Kadampa Center, you know, knock on wood, I don't want anybody to get killed coming to Kadampa Center, but people get killed on the road going someplace wonderful all the time. You know, they're going to church or they're going to the food bank to serve the needy, and they get killed in a car wreck on the way. You get a little scratch, and you get septicemia, and all your organs shut down, just because a couple little bacteria got in there. Okay? The causes of death are infinite. Things that we think are good for us, like food, can be the causes of death. Water can be the cause of death. There's nothing that cannot be the cause of death. I mean, there's just countless. If we just look at the odds, the causes of death are infinite. And then the next one is the causes of life are tenuous, okay? This body this life depends upon is so, I mean, it's amazing that it even holds together. It's all these parts, and so many things can cause it to malfunction. It's just very weak to think that our life depends entirely on this frail body. Okay? The body is incredibly fragile. So, the conclusion we come to here is, what do? Okay, we want to make this life we realize we have to make this life meaningful. When? In 10 years? Now, we have to, and I'm going to use meaningful and spiritual practice similarly here. We have to practice now. Because this is really just a way of saying we must do our spiritual practice. We must practice, develop our minds. When? We must do it now. Okay? And the third point, at the moment of death, which is when the body and the mind separate, the only thing that can help us, that can be of use to us, that can be beneficial to us, is our spiritual practice. Family and friends, not helpful. Now, this doesn't mean if we're sick, if we have a terminal illness, that they can't be incredibly helpful. Okay, helping to take care for us and read to us and saying prayers. But at the actual moment of death, the separation of our body and mind, we are completely alone. And we'll talk about next week what that process is like. Nobody is there holding our hand. Nobody's sitting there saying how nice we are. Nobody's putting a cool compress on our brow. At the moment of death, that actual separation of the body and mind, we are completely on our own. Nobody can help us. Okay? Our possessions, our beautiful house, our clothing, everything, all our stuff, definitely not useful. We can't take it with us. Okay, we can't put side pockets in our coffin. Even if we're going to be reborn in the same town, we can't come back and find our stuff. Yeah, not much chance of that. Our possessions are of no benefit at the moment of death. Even our body, again, that we've put so much work into trying to keep it healthy, so we don't have heart disease, so we don't have diabetes, so we don't get a stroke, so we keep our mental faculties, so that we eat healthily. The body is discarded at the moment of death. That's what the whole process. The body, no matter how good a shape it's in, even if we get struck by lightning while we're out running a marathon, and our body's in peak shape, the body is of no use at all. Okay? So the only thing that is beneficial is our spiritual practice. Therefore, I must practice how do we say it? Yeah. Well, we've already got urgency, but we have to practice effectively or correctly, or practice well, okay? We have to now, okay? We've already decided now. We've got the urgency, but the thing is we have to do our practice in a way that benefits our mind, okay? We're not just sitting on a cushion and counting our breath and not changing our mind. Okay, so we have to practice now, and we have to practice enthusiastically and effectively. So it's a meditation on death that it changes the way we live this life. Okay, the point is not to get gloomy, not to get depressed, but to think about in this way so that you actually change your life now. I'll get to you in just a second. Yeah, so we've got the 3 main points, the 3 sub-points under each one, and a conclusion that build practice now effectively. Okay? And, you know, you don't take this as gospel. This is your analysis. You say, I don't accept that. That's wrong. And you can argue with yourself. What's on this side? What's on that side? Does this lead to a different conclusion? That's what analytic meditation is all about. But it's meditation that changes your mind. Okay? Question in the back. If we can get a mic over there, please.
On number 3, where you talk about only our spiritual practice is useful at the time of death, and family and friends are not helpful. If your family and friends also have a practice and have an energy, and you all are kind of synchronous, I can't believe that that would not be helpful.
I would say that that can be very helpful leading up to the moment of death, okay? If we are so fortunate as to have a calm, quiet death where, you know, we're in a, you know, in a room and we know we're going to die and people are saying prayers and putting images in front of us and chanting mantras in the background, that's fantastic. But that's preparation. The actual moment of death, the separation of the body and the mind, the only thing that can help us is the realizations in our own mind. And then if we have a very sudden, violent death, like a car crash, certainly family and friends are not available to us leading up to that. Okay, that's why having a calm, quiet death is one of the reasons it's considered more beneficial. But at the actual moment of death, it's only our body and our consciousness. Okay, that other stuff can be very helpful leading up to that, though. Okay, I mean, we can be having spiritual realizations up until seconds before we die, and other people can be helping us with that. You know, our teachers, our family, our friends. So it's not saying we shouldn't have family or friends, but at that final moment, they're not there. We're alone. Okay.
I'm a little confused by that answer. I understand at that moment, but after that moment, what's the purpose of the medicine puja?
That is a great question, and I would say that is a question for a Geshe, okay? Because we do prayers for people who have died and are in the bardo, and how that works, that's over my pay grade, okay? I mean, I do it, I come to the pujas, I think there's benefit in doing them. Now, Geshe Gelik will say, if you press him on, he'll say, maybe the benefit's for the people doing the prayers. Okay, maybe it's for the people who are left behind who are doing this. You know, we don't know if it's benefiting the person in the bardo, but he says, we're sure it's benefiting those of us doing the prayers. That's a way out of that, but again, yeah.
So in the Buddhist, I haven't read up on this. So in the Buddhist line of thinking, once you go to the bardo, there are no guides or no, I mean, is nothing there but you and this space?
I mean, they're also, I don't know much about this either. This is what the Tibetan Book of Death and Dying is about, which I have not read. Again, I'm not qualified to talk about this, but it's your consciousness and it's karma. And you see all sorts of really weird stuff based on all this karma that your consciousness is carrying. And it appears as just as real as Kadampa Center does right now. And it can be quite frightening and upsetting if you're not prepared for it. If your spiritual practice, particularly your bodhicitta, that I'm doing this for the benefit of others, is not strong. But there's a lot of stuff that appears to your mind. But my understanding is it's not like you have Geshe Gelik there holding your hand as you go through that. This is why we have to be prepared. This is why it's so important. We can either go into the next lifetime totally under the control of our karma, just grabbing out of fear at some future rebirth, not the most beneficial one, or we can, if our spiritual practice is strong, we go into it with a sense of choice, and we pick the most beneficial rebirth. It's said that a good practitioner does not fear death. Right, how's this go? A good practitioner accepts rebirth, okay, and prepares for it. A great practitioner does not fear death because they feel prepared for it. And a highly realized practitioner actually looks forward to the moment of death because they know they will be in control of the process of rebirth and can choose the most beneficial rebirth. It's not that they do anything to speed up the time of their death, but they actually look forward to it as something good that's going to happen to them. Yeah. I may not have that quite right, but I know the last one is they actually look forward to the moment of death because they can choose the next rebirth in a way that will be the most benefit to the most other beings. Any other questions or comments before we actually do the meditation? Yeah, one over here, please.
So is our spiritual practice kind of like practicing for that?
That's one way of looking at it. I think that's a simplification, but that's certainly part of it. We practice so that we'll be prepared for the moment of death. Okay, that's kind of the final exam.
Whether we pass or not.
But it's not like how we live this. But again, we're also doing this so we live this life more meaningfully. So it's kind of both, yeah.
Because I was thinking last week you said that our thoughts are our karma. Mm-hmm. So I feel like my karma makes it very hard for me to meditate effectively. Yeah. So I'm kind of fighting that all the time.
Yeah, we're all, when we first start off, we become aware that our karmic tendencies or habits are very strong and it's hard to change. As we develop our spiritual practice, we're less controlled by our karma. There's a little bit more choice. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just, in our last reading, the third determination where we must practice well, the way it's phrased, I just like it. It's the determination to practice Dharma purely, unmixed with materialistic tendencies. Yeah. Which I think speaks to some of those other things too.
Purely is what? Yeah, without attachment to any of the things that we know aren't going to happen, or aren't going to help us. Yeah, so it's not like, attachment to our wonderful library or our clothes or our family. Attachment, that clinging. Yeah, it's without attachment to what we're leaving behind. Okay, thank you, Aaron. Okay, so let's do a little bit of analytic meditation. And again, if you're not familiar with this, it may seem just like thinking, and that's okay. And I'm going to try and run through the whole thing quickly over the next 15 minutes. The homework is to meditate on this every day at home, and you may just want to pick one point or one sub-point and just think about that. You don't have to go through the whole thing every time, because that's really a lot to deal with initially. After you become familiar with it, you can just kind of touch on it. But it's a good idea to also do what we call a review meditation, which means just reading it so you get the points fixed in your mind so that you have them memorized and can access them and don't have to be flipping through a book to do the meditation. Okay. Begin by checking your posture. Take 3 deep breaths from the abdomen, with the stomach expanding on the in-breath. Now allow your breathing to return to its normal pattern and set your motivation for the meditation to follow. Think, I am doing the 9-point death meditation to develop my mind so that I may be of greater benefit to all living beings. And having set our motivation, we'll begin with just a couple minutes of concentration meditation. The mind on the movement of the breath in and out through the nostrils. And now that our mind is concentrated, alert, focused, we bring the same concentration to our analysis of the 9-point death meditation. We keep our awareness on the points of the meditation, And every time we notice that the mind has wandered off, we bring it back to the point of the analysis. So very similar technique, just the object is different. The first point of the meditation, death is definite. We know this intellectually. We understand it, but we don't realize it. We don't live our lives as if it were true. Death is definite. I will die. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. I am not going to be the one person in human history who doesn't die. And to help come to this realization, we can think everyone who has been born has died or will die. We can almost say that being born is the cause of dying. One inevitably leads to the other. No one, no matter how rich, how powerful, how wise, has not or will not die. Think of how many people throughout countless time have died compared to the number who are currently alive. Infinitely more. And think, I am constantly getting closer to the moment of my death. Clock never goes in reverse. My lifespan is always getting shorter. For most of us, there's significantly less left than we've used up already. But even if we're young and we live to a ripe old age, we're inevitably, inexorably getting closer to the moment of death. And in that constantly shortening span of life that remains to us, there will be so little time for spiritual practice. A good chunk will be sleeping, feeding myself, getting dressed, getting undressed, paying my bills. The time for spiritual practice is precious but incredibly small. So when we think like that, we do the analysis. The Buddha said we'll come to the conclusion that I have to do my spiritual practice. I have to develop my mind. That may not be the conclusion we come to right now. There may be other conclusions that come up, and that's fine. But just work with the points of the meditation. And then we think, death is definite, and the time of my death is unknown. There is no guarantee that I will get my actuarial 78 years. Or if I come from a family of long-lived people, that I'll live to be 93 or 94 like my grandparents. We are constantly aware of people having sudden, unexpected deaths. I mean, that's all we've been hearing in the news lately. Las Vegas, Puerto Rico, Houston. Did any of those people know that that was when their life would end? And the causes of death are so many. Going to Las Vegas on a wonderful vacation, who thought that would be the cause of death for all those people? A vacation in Puerto Rico. Driving to a family get-together. Just inhaling the wrong virus in the air. So many causes, possible causes of my death. And the causes for me to continue living, I mean, it's amazing most of us got through our childhood. We were so reckless and unconcerned about our own safety. And now as we get older, we're increasingly aware of the frailness of our body, how it could just fall apart at any moment. It's a miracle that we've made it as far as we have. So we have to practice when, now. We can't put it off. We can't assume we'll have time at some point in the future. It's something that has to be done now. And finally, we think about how at the moment of death, the actual separation of the mind and body, the only thing that can help us to deal with that experience in a beneficial way is our spiritual practice, our mind training. Our family and friends will not go through that process with us. This is something we go through completely alone. We can't pack our possessions, everything we've accumulated, and take that with us. And we can't take our body with us. We shed the body. Everything physical is left behind. And our consciousness goes forward alone. So we think, I must practice now, and I must practice purely, without attachment to what I will leave behind. And we can end our meditation with a dedication, acknowledging that it's very unusual to sit this way and think like this. And it's made a positive impression on our mind stream. And may that ripen in the future in a way that benefits all living beings. Okay. Any questions or comments? That was quite rushed. And as I said, I'd like you to do this meditation this week, but you don't have to go through the whole thing every time. You may just want to concentrate on certain parts of it. Any questions or comments before we break up? Okay. Let's see. Erin, do you have the website or the...
yes.
Yeah,
so the meditation that Robbie gave us is...
It's very easy to find in lots of books, but the version that I was using is from Venerable Sangye Kadro, Kathleen MacDonald, who wrote How to Meditate. She's been here to Kadampa Center as a teacher. She's very practical, and her meditation can be found at... On the
Discovering Buddhism, Kadampa Center's Discovering Buddhism website, like on the materials page where everything's posted. And also homework number 3 is posted there.
Okay.
And there's 20 copies here. But for those streaming and for anyone who wants to do the electronic versus paper, it's online as well.
Okay.
And the
How to Meditate
book, How to Meditate, is available in the bookstore.
In your local Kadampa Center bookstore. Thank you. And so next week we'll be doing the death dissolution meditation, which is a very complicated meditation describing what actually happens as the body and mind separate, and it involves things that appear to our eyes and sounds and smells. So it's really different, I think, for most people from anything they've done before. And then the week after we'll do review meditations. And just remember, I think next week the state fair is going to be going on. Is that correct? So the traffic will be different. Yeah. So you just give yourself some extra time, like I did not do this evening, and I got stuck on the belt line coming from Cary. Next week it'll be even worse. So just be forewarned about that. Any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.